Well, of all those in the army close to the commander, none is more dangerous than the spies. Words, well, of course, it's a Chinese proverb, but more relevant to, current events and national security in recent times. And if you know, you know. A good way to start the program today. Welcome to your Perfect Morning Starter on Channels Television. I am Bukola Koka Kadi. Not to worry, although I'm close to you, but your secrets are safe with me. I don't know any, by the way.
Okay.
How are you doing?
We're starting on a cryptic note on the show today. We'll figure it out together, hopefully. I'm fine. Welcome to the show. It's a beautiful Tuesday morning right here in Lagos. February, I can tell you, is nearing its finish line. It's the 17th of February. I'm Kayode Okikulu, and the show starts with security, right? Since we started on that note, Bukola, we can tell you that President Bola Tinubu, who's been making a trip, I should say, across northern Nigeria yesterday in Yola, Adamawa State, spoke about security. And for the president, he's again reiterating his administration's commitment to win the battle against terrorism, banditry that have ravaged several parts of the country. He gave this assurance in Yola. He was in Kebbi at some point. But this time in Yola, Adamawa State, he was commissioning project embarked upon by the Adamawa State Governor, Umaru Fintiri. Now, this is not a takeaway from his message, but the governor of Adamawa State is a member of a PDP. Adamawa State is meant to be a PDP state. But with these moves here and there, there's a lot of prediction that the Adamawa State governor may just be joining the APC. But I digress. Back to the story. The president specifically commended the efforts of the armed forces of Nigeria, and he pledged to support men in uniform in the discharge of their duties. And speaking of that duties, there was a major clearance operation, Kogi, Kwara State yesterday. Got a lot of people talking, but there was a sour note in Polka, which it was a terrible sight to behold. So as much as there are wins being recorded, there are also losses being recorded as well, and a lot of people cannot wait for this to end. So as much as we can, we support our military, the police, the NSA, the list goes on and on. But it's not just by mouth, and I know we have said this time and again. We can talk about the support we're giving them, but really we must do beyond just giving them support by mouth or trying to say, well, we've budgeted a lot to insecurity. We must not treat insecurity with kid gloves. Oh, it happened in this area. Well, these people are restive because of this, and then there's elections coming, so let's find a way to placate them so we don't lose. No, crime is crime. If anyone has committed a crime, they must do the time, regardless of their ethnicity, religion, political affiliation, or what have you. We must stop treating security or insecurity with the, yes, it is wrong, but this person belongs to this party or this ethnicity or this religion and all of that. So that is what we expect from government.
Yes, indeed. We're cheery to note that the president, was giving assurances. This is not the first time, really, that he's given assurances about the fight against insecurity and how we appear to be on a sound footing in the war against banditry and insurgency. And we see some gains. Well, there are some losses as well. In Polka, we see reports from Operation Hadinkai, how the troops, defended, our territorial integrity on a number of occasions, but with some losses. And we expect more, especially from vulnerable communities where there's very little provision of security in terms of, boots on ground. Either it is men of the Nigeria Police Force, absence of infrastructure, or it is even, a garrison for the defense of those communities whenever there is, a threat of attack. More importantly, the assurance of, the presence of those security forces when there are real threats. That is what is important, because more often than not, what we hear is that, when the attack was about to occur, moments before the attack, there is an exit of the forces. So there are some gains, no doubt, and we commend men of the armed forces for the gains that they are recording, for their sacrifice that they are recording. We commend the men of the armed forces, and we appreciate their work, and we're grateful to them. But we expect more, especially results, gains from all of those instructions, orders that the president gave towards the end of last year, particularly following the designation of Nigeria as a CPC for increased recruitment in all the formations. We're hoping to see that the gains come through, especially as we continue to see that insurgency and banditry is pushing further down into Nigeria South. But Kade, we cannot, it didn't escape our notice that the president visited Adamawa Yola. And it is a state of particular concern because prior to this time, especially after the defection of former Vice President, I beg your pardon, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, to the ADC, the governor of the state had insisted that, look, Adamawa is PDP, we're going to remain in the PDP, and there was no negotiating his political future at that time. But in the rally that we saw that took place over the weekend, he left his political future open, and that gave indications that indeed something was about to happen in Adamawa State. But as the opposition would say, the APC does not have 31 states. The APC has 31 governors. So what will happen in 2027 if indeed we see yet another swelling of the ranks of the All Progressives Congress with the possible defection of yet another governor? But I'd like to believe that all the same, the president would have visited any state that is not in the ruling party for projects commission, and in the spirit of bipartisanship and healthy politicking.
I like the way you put it, Bukola. By the way, he visited Kebbi, former AGF, who's a major person in the ADC. He's from Kebbi State. He's in Adamawa State now. Again, former vice president, is a major person in the ADC, and he's from Adamawa State. So I don't know, where will he visit next? Kaduna? But hey, Jeffrey, how you doing? Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, guys. Good morning, everyone. I got caught up in the normal things that happen on the Monday morning or Tuesday morning or Wednesday morning, whichever is convenient. But for me, I'm more interested in the lives of our people being safe. I'm not interested in, if they like, let them all defect. It's none of my business. It's within their rights to defect.
You're not worried about the possibility of a one-party state?
Well, as it is right now, it is clear to me that what's happening in Nigeria is more of the politicians and the people. It's not an APC-PDP thing. PDP had their time, 28 governors, as a matter of fact, during the time of PDP. In fact, that's when they boasted.
But the APC has done more than the PDP.
So the numbers are big. That's when PDP said they are going to stay in power for 60 years. I'm sure they were thinking of 16, they thought of 60. So you can see now, APC has 29 governors. If Adamawa governor defects, which is very likely, it's going to be 30. So we'll be left with Otsi in Abia, or left with Abga in Anambra, Accord in Osun State, and then whatever is left of the PDP, as a matter of fact. So whatever they want to do with their political future, and then the APC is going to have its own problem as well. So for clarity, if you look at the history of politics in Nigeria, the PDP did not collapse because the opposition was strong. The PDP collapsed because something went wrong within the PDP. That's the same thing that will happen to the APC. I don't see ADC, PDP regrouping to knock off APC in power. It is internal implosion that leads to the disintegration of big political parties. So there are people that work with the president now, not because they like the president, but because the president being in power is the security of their jobs. Some people are working with the president because they really love the president. So you should be able to decipher who is what. So as a matter of fact, the reason I'm no longer interested in their movement, of course, I'm big time against one-party state, but it looks like the politicians are not listening. So what do you do to people that don't listen? Because they're not driven by ideology. They are driven by two things: self-preservation, which is their personal interest protected by the Constitution, and subservience to power. Some of them can't stay outside power. That's why I keep saying that Nyesom Wike has not been tested. Amechi was just tested for for the first time, look at, the battle he's fighting. He was a speaker for 8 years. Sorry, I always go to River State because that seemed to be an easy case to test run. He was speaker for 8 years. He was governor for 8 years. He was minister for 8 years. Just barely few years outside power. You see, the war he's fighting to keep that his relevance and push. Nyesom Wike in 1999 till date has been in power one way or the other, apart from the few hiatus he had when the power was taken away from Amechi before he returned. So I do not say anybody is politically a jagaban in that sense until you will leave power. So that's why I have a lot of respect for the president politically, because he has stayed out of power for almost 17 years, came not just becoming minister, he became president. So a lot of them are looking at this model, what they can do and all of that. So I'm no longer interested in their defection conversation, because now the Nigerian people need to decide for themselves what they want for their future as a people. But if you leave your future in the hands of these politicians, you're lost cause. Forget about them. For them, they want to align with power, they want to align with the center, they want to align with their interests, and it's within their rights. As far as Nigerian politics, I've surrendered and I've admitted and given up to say, I agree with Coyote's position, perhaps this is our own kind of politics. Until it changes, forget about all of this. So back to the question of national security. No matter where they defect to, where they go to, where they come from.
Security is not defecting, right?
No, I'm just saying, please, whatever they have to do.
Hunger is not defecting.
Whatever the government has to do to improve the dignity of human life, to help us value human lives a lot more better in Nigeria. Human life is too cheap in this country. It's too much. People just die and we just go on. Another 100 may be kidnapped, 50 will be killed. We just come here and read numbers and all of that like it's normal. In fact, it's now normal to us, because even us, we're becoming desensitized in that sense. I'm not impressed by president giving me speeches of assurances. That's not what I want to hear. I want to begin to look at the data and say, between this time and this time, the number is reducing significantly to the point where we're not looking at, oh, look at things have changed. Yeah. Then we have now upheld Section 14 of the Constitution, security of lives and property. For me, that is the focus. Politics is here, so we're going to expect all of this. We'll get to that political season. All of us will be here now, and we'll talk about it a lot. So leave them to do their thing. If they like, let them all defect. It's none of my business.
Speaking of one thing that doesn't defect, it's your health, and we seldom talk about it, but it's staring us in the face as the NCDC is reporting that 31 people have died from Lassa fever in 5 weeks. That's according to the latest data from the NCDC. The agency has said that there have been 754 suspected cases, out of which 165 were confirmed. And among those affected were 9 health workers. So indeed, our frontline health men who provide care and medical intervention are also affected. And cumulatively, as of week 5 of 2026, 31 deaths have been reported, with a case fatality rate of 18.8%, which is lower than the case fatality rate for the same period of 2025. That's 19.6%. That's from 2025. And 9 states have been affected. Guys, this speaks to the real issues of, the real issue rather of governance, especially the implementation of, budgets, and of course the approaches to tackling healthcare at the primary healthcare level. Cardi and Jeffrey.
I really don't want to add anything. This has been staring us in the face. They call some diseases of poverty. I mean, when you Google Lassa fever, you know the country that comes up, but the countries that come up, even the name Lassa sort of belongs to us in that sense. So it is sad. When we see figures like this, it's a pointer to the state of, hygiene on the one hand. It's a pointer to the state of people's welfare. It's also pointed to the state of primary healthcare centers across the country. It's a pointer to several things, and that's why I said some diseases are just described as the disease of poverty. And it's sad that that tag still remains in 2026. It's beyond numbers. These are people. We must clearly do better. But hey, let's tell you that in South Africa, well, they have charged 3 people in court for allegedly killing a 22-year-old Nigerian e-hailing driver, Isaac Sedlat. We had that conversation with our South Africa correspondent yesterday, and he gave us updates. So we can tell you that the suspect, Dikeledi Tiezimfela, who's aged 44, Gwetion Machidi, aged 25, and McLaren Mashuana, aged 30, appeared before the Pretoria Magistrate Court yesterday. And this was also disclosed in a statement by the South African National Prosecuting Authority, saying the suspects are facing charges of premeditated murder and robbery. Now, you may have seen that very disturbing video. A man and a woman got into the e-hailing taxi of the late Isaac Sedlat, strangled him, stole his mobile phone. Now, the lady that was in that video is one of those charged. But we had heard that the man was at large, but it's been reported that he has turned himself in, right? So this is a story we're following. But guys, this is where we're at right now. Our correspondent has said time and again that, crime is a major issue in South Africa that has touched both South Africans. In fact, he told us about the case of his sister as well. But having Isaac, there you see him, his life snuffed out in such manner is terrible, and justice must be done.
It's very sad to see. It's very heartbreaking. South Africa is a mixed bag when it comes to development. Very advanced country, largest economy in Africa, but the level of crime is so bad depending on where you live. Places like Johannesburg and the rest of them, where you have a lot of these population. I do not know what exactly they would have wanted to collect from him that they couldn't get from him without killing him. There are so many things, Well, however, it's just very heartbreaking. Killing their own citizen, killing other citizens. The South African government must rise above whatever sentiment there is. I think the ease with which you get gun in South Africa is way more than you get here in Nigeria. Remember, some of their heroes too, this is how they killed them. AK was murdered in cold blood, Lucky Dube, we could go on, and some of that. So, and then there's a recent media personality as well recently that was also killed somewhere in Joburg. So it's just the notoriety of crime. Something has to be done to issues around gun control, issues around the suburbs, especially in Johannesburg and places like Pretoria and some of these places, to see how they can curb crime extensively. In South Africa, there are places that are more notorious for certain things than the others. Maybe Cape Town a lot better, but this place called Johannesburg and the city center is quite disturbing. I have even seen a video where a journalist was reporting live crossing, and he was robbed on live TV. You know what that means? The person is reporting from a scene, and then they robbed him on live TV. They didn't care whether they were being streamed live. So I'm happy at least justice will be served within the system, and let's hope that this deter some of these miscreants and some of these elements from carrying out this dastardly act. But more importantly, our thoughts and our prayers and our heart go out to the family of this young man who will live with the pain of having to see how he died. There's a difference between you heard the person died than you watch how he died. It's not something any family should go through. So I pray God will give you guys the strength to bear this very painful loss, guys.
I listened closely to our conversation, your specifically conversation with our correspondent yesterday, Innocent, and you asked him a critical question about why Nigerians are oftentimes the target. And, his explanation was comforting, but at the same time, not quite satisfactory when he said, look, indeed, other nationals are also targeted in South Africa. But if we went down memory lane to the history of xenophobic attacks in South Africa, we could have quite a handful or perhaps a bag of the numbers of South Africans, numbers of Nigerians that have been targeted and, that have met their untimely death, amid xenophobic attacks. Now, there are a complex web of issues around xenophobic attacks in South Africa, perhaps, especially when it has to do with Nigerian nationals in that country. There are issues around they're taking our jobs, there are issues around they're taking our women, there are issues around perhaps Nigerians are often involved in unwholesome jobs, in drugs and crimes. But there must be a sit down between, and a regular one at that, because communication is at the heart of conflict resolution. A regular sit down between the Nigerian community and the South African community in that country, such that they can build understanding, they can build community relations, and they can exit, this era of hatred and consistent targeting of people who are going about their normal jobs, people who are looking for opportunities for expression, for self-actualization. Sadly, the young Nigerian, just 22 years old, who was about to graduate, according to reports, has met his untimely death at the hands of misguided people who were just after what was temporary. And now, what happens to them? Do they get a headway in life? They have been arrested. So those complex issues must be explored in that country, because whether you like it or not, people will often seek, whether it's greener pastures or a comfortable life in other parts of the country other than theirs. You cannot stop migration. You cannot stop the movement of people from one place to the other. And so the world must be a safe place for everyone, regardless of what part of the world it is that we're talking about.
All right, so that's the outlook, what we've just decided to look at. But we have more for you on the program. But we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll look at the headlines. Stay with us. Welcome back. Let's bring in Mr. Denny Fetayo. He is the CEO of Megastar Magazine, joining us virtually. Mr. Fetayo, thank you so much for staying with us and coming through this morning.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure to be here. Good morning.
New Telegraph is where we start from. So it leads with terror war. Trump sends 100 more military personnel to Nigeria. The riders, America sanctions 8 Nigerians over links to Boko Haram, cybercrime. NGF set to tackle insecurity across Nigeria, says killings in Niger heartbreaking. FG warns against enlisting abroad after reports of Nigeria's death in Ukraine. That's the page 2, 3, and 6 read in the New Telegraph. What do you make of that story, Mr. Fetayo?
First and foremost, when you have an issue or a challenge that is beyond what you can comprehend, what you can deal with, it's expected of you to call on your ally. But it now depends at which area they are going to come in. If hardware, training, supporting, and all of that, monitoring, etc., to make sure that we put this war behind us, because economically is not telling good when it comes to Nigerian rating, saying that, this part of the country you can do your business, this part of the country don't go to that place. Somehow there's a way that it reduces our mark when it comes to when it has to do with international community or foreign direct investment, etc., So sending 100 more military personnel to Nigeria, for training, for collaboration, so that they can win this war and put it behind us, I think is a good one. And those people who are involved, what I would plea is that they should make it transparent. It's not to be done in a behind the camera or off camera or whatever it is. So let us know, shame them publicly if they deserve to be. If they deserve to, let them pay the penalty of what the crime they have committed, their sponsor, those who are supplying them arms, etc., So, but they should make it public so that it will serve as a deterrent to those who might think that they can destabilize the nation, or those who profiting from this terror war that is ongoing in Nigeria. But above all, we need more allies to put this war to an end.
Interesting. Let's get to the Vanguard newspaper now, which takes a departure from security for its front page story, but looks at what has been dominating the headlines in the last 1 week. Take a look at this Electoral Act hide and seek game in Abuja as reps avoid joint meeting. Interesting. Reps avoid joint meeting. And this is despite assurances from the leadership of the House that indeed, a decision that augurs well for all will be reached eventually. But the riders provide an insight into what happened in the National Assembly yesterday. Meeting rescheduled to late night at Senate President's Lodge in Maitama. How to make electronic transmission of results glitch-free in 2027. Take note of the words, glitch-free. Telcos dismiss inadequate infrastructure claim of Senate as half-truth, say Nigeria has capacity for real-time e-transmission. Haunted by 2023 glitches, stakeholders demand guarantees, not promises. And lastly, NAS to tidy up Electoral Act Amendment Bill today. Mr. Ifetayo, you have, many options to choose from this host of riders on what to react to. Go ahead.
First and foremost, the Senate, they are of the opinion that it should, because of internet, whatever it is, the collating officer could not do his or her job. That perhaps all those results from polling unit have been signed and can then transmit that. And House of Rep is saying everything is just electronically transmitted. Where I think they can, so many times in the past they've disagreed. They just need to harmonize and give Nigeria what they desire. I read a report yesterday that Finland had been voted as the best place in the world for family to live. And I was there about 3 years ago, and where they won best country in the world back to back for 5 years. And one of the key points that gave them or that made them that country was that their parliament, they don't just come together and say, this is what we want to do. Each rep will go to their individual constituency. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? It is what the people say. That is what they will bring to the floor of the House and debate and fine-tune. Nigeria have been crying for free, fair, and credible election, and let me use the word a glitch-free election. So what is that? It's not a big deal for them to give it to Nigeria, so that we can be sure that our vote will be counted. Whoever we choose or Nigerian choose to lead them, to be their leader come 2027, will be the person that Nigeria actually wants. So whatever it is, both House of Rep or Senate, please, they should just do this for Nigerians, and Nigeria put them there to go and represent them regardless of their constituency or senatorial district. We are begging, we are asking, but I hope that they will do the needful, because in the past they've been having misunderstanding. I will just pray that they harmonize things so that we can move forward as well.
Now, speaking of move forward, let's move on to the Guardian newspaper. Leads with 2027 as well. Protesters storm National Assembly as debate on Electoral Act resumes. It's a page 6 read on the front page. And I think it's something we have spoken about time and again. And maybe to touch on this story, relief for Nigerians as food inflation eases to single digit after 10 years. So let's maybe just take a quick sample. Mr. Ifetayo, do you feel this relief?
Number, whether it's 1% when it comes to economy, is very, very important. But the relief that I would have been asking is interest rate when it comes to businesses that drives economy, especially small and medium businesses. Informal sector, they can have access to this. But it's a good one to Nigeria, but I'm not sure people who are still feeling it. Inflation coming down to 1 digit, people are still complaining. How can you say somebody 70,000 naira minimum wages when things are skyrocket in the market. Yes, bag of rice came down a bit, this and that came down a bit, but is your pocket, do you have that purchasing power to make sure that even if it is 1 digit or whatever it is, but let's just hope that it still continue to come down. But it's a plus for this administration. If they say in the last 10 years we have 1 single digit, and we just hope that the Nigerian can feel that in their pocket, they can have more purchasing power, and even the minimum wage, even if it can be double, it's a good one for me anyway.
Okay, so you're feeling it, right? The food inflation easing. You're experiencing it when you go to the markets. Well, maybe you shop at the supermarket, Mr. Fetayo. Maybe that's why. But just to get that off you.
No, not really. But it's just towards December. We know that that was why I mentioned in particular that bag of rice. 8, 9, 10 months ago, I know how much it was when we want to do something, and they said it has come to this. I was surprised. I went, okay. Let's hope that it's getting better.
Good, because I wanted to humanize this, because the figures tell one thing, but the reality says another. And for a lot of people, they say, it looks like for the APC, at least the continuum, they create a problem and then they solve it, and it's something to celebrate, in a manner of speaking, right? But we'll get into some of these other issues during the course of a program. But that's it with the front page of the Guardian newspaper. Jeffrey.
All right, so let's go to other papers. Let's see what this Nigeria is saying. This Nigeria is leading with, of course, the controversial issues. 2027 National Assembly considers new January dates for election. Joint Electoral Act harmonization collapses. Members absent at crucial meeting. I know you've mentioned that, so maybe I'll move on to others, because nobody wants to be in the bad books of the Nigerian people. I think the Nigerian people are very clear on what they want without ambiguity. It is the political class that are trying to, do what they can, typical of politics, to give their own explainers as to what they are trying to do. But let's see how that plays out immediately. But let's go to the story just besides the picture. So FCTA releases list of approved RFO for regularized area councils land allocation. We also see the ops just besides the nameplate, active voice subscription reaches 171.7 million in Q2 of 2025, according to the MBS. Why I got curious about that, because one of the bone of contention with the Electoral Act, especially Clause 60, Sub 3, has to do with technological advancement in terms of network coverage and broadband penetration. Mr. Fetayo.
Yes, I will start from the top one, active voice. Communication is making wave, is reaching the unreached and all of that. Even the number of voters or will-be voters, I'm not sure we've had 171 million. So if our network communication, internet can reach or can get to these people all over Nigeria, I don't think transmission of electoral result or election result rather should be a problem for us. It's just for them to synergize, do a mock election and see the area that you have challenges, talking about logistics, the riverine area, how should they cover them, how should they, those are the things should be put in perspective. But it's a good one anyway, 171 million. That means the market is growing, the penetration is good. And also the FCTA release list of approved. All these things should be digitalized. Sometimes you want to check something, you must visit the agency before you can, ask questions before. But whatever it is they are releasing, but everything should be digitalized, that you can sit in the comfort of your room, go to their website, make your inquiry, and get your result on time, or your paper process, and not that you submit, you have to visit, and all of that. But whatever it is they are doing in FCT, they can digitalize it and simplify the land allocation or RFO or CFO, whatever it is they want to call it. But in overall, I just wish that we put our house in order come 2027, because Nigeria are actually looking forward to it. We don't need all these minor issues to disturb us or to derail us from what Nigerians actually want. I pray that we have a wonderful outing come 2027. We have 171 million coverage. Why can't we do less than 30 million voters to transmit their results real time and online?
Okay, Mr. Fatayo, thank you so much for bringing to bear your thoughts on this particular part of the program that has to do with the headlines. Almost thank you. Mr. Adeni Fatayo is the CEO of Megastar Magazine and a journalist. Thank you, sir. We'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk the economy. So the numbers are out. The MBS is irregular numbers. Every 15th of the succeeding month, we get to numbers of the previous month. So as we see, 15% inflation literally tapering from 25 after it was rebased, and now food inflation has hit 8% or so, single digit for the first time in a very long while. What does this mean? Kelvin Emmanuel, an economist, will join us in just a moment to break it down. Join us. Let's bring in Mr. Kelvin Emmanuel. Thank you so much. Mr. Emmanuel, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Good morning. Thank you, Jeff. Good morning. Thanks for having me. Should I say Happy New Year to you?
Yeah, Happy New Year. Yes, for the first time we're talking on TV this year. So, but let's get to the numbers. I know you've always had problems with the MBS's number, and I know you navigate around perhaps the yield curve when you look at how the monetary policy authority or monetary authority in this sense literally chase the inflation numbers when it was double digits in the region of the 30s and high 20s, keep increasing basis point until it got to about almost 28, region about 27 point something. But now we've seen the rebasing of both the GDP and the CPI, and we got about 25%, and now we're talking 15. In fact, right now we're talking food inflation at 8, but the monetary authorities seem to be watching still closely since all of this has happened. But what do you make of these new numbers? Good things happening? Good numbers? Okay, oh dear. So we'll try and reestablish connection with Kelvin Emmanuel, the economist, joining us from our Abuja studio. So break down some of these numbers for us so that we have an understanding of what these numbers really mean. So primarily, inflation doesn't necessarily talk about the actual price. It just looks at the rate of change of those prices, either north or south of those numbers. That means whether it's coming up or coming down. So it's a volatile number in that sense, to see how we can. Okay, Mr. Manuel, I understand you. Okay, I thought that was
there. Jeffrey, don't worry, you're not alone. It's quite interesting because this, I mean, we've not had single digits for 10 years, right? So
yes, for about 10 years.
If you do like a subtraction, simple subtractions is about mid 2015, so much later. So it basically says for me, and I will reiterate that, you see, what is synonymous with 2015? Yeah, that's when the APC came to power. And a lot of people have looked back at the previous administration and they have a long list of things that they wish the government had done better. So this is almost like, not even factory reset, just going back 10 years to now start again from where we were then. But hey, things have since changed. Countries have moved very fast. But Jeffrey, Emmanuel's back.
Mr. Emmanuel, for a moment we lost connection. So back to you. I hope you got my question, by the way.
Yes, I did. Geoff, good morning. Kayode, good morning to you. I was going to say that, you know, when we're having this conversation, it's always important to give historical perspective to our audience listening, so they understand how we got to where we are today and what CBN has done over the last 2.5 years to try to reverse the situation. There was one major event within the last decade that really catalyzed the inflation numbers, which are wartime inflation numbers we've seen in Nigeria, you know, and that event was the abuse of Ways and Means Section 38. And that cycle really accelerated in 2019, where you had about 17 trillion that was pumped into the economy, and it didn't have real sector production that was accelerating as fast as money supply was injected into the system. And because there was no real sector productivity to match the increase in money supply, inflation was the natural result. And 2022 accelerated it further, where
Oh dear. Well, we'll try and re-establish connection with Mr. Emmanuel, just trying to give us a background onto what we're dealing with. Mr. Emmanuel, we understand you're back. Please go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead. Apologies, go ahead, please.
Okay. So between 2019 and 2022, the CBN advanced the federal government of Nigeria the equivalent of 53 billion US dollars. All of that cash that was pumped into the system really jacked up inflation in Nigeria, because the real sector productivity did not, you know, was not growing as fast. And it went into
We'll try and sort this out as soon as possible. I'll get the thoughts, because it's important that we lay the foundation as to what we're dealing with in terms of numbers, because I understand the challenges of the average Nigerian, and your challenges are valid. So there was where we were all here when prices were low across board, whether it's energy, food, and all of that. Well, the administration came and said the wage bill was too much. They were paying a lot in terms of wage bill, from electricity subsidy to PMS subsidy to subsidy for FX. There were all kinds of subsidy, and they felt like, look, we have to liberalize trade, we have to take away subsidy so we can taper inflation and boost productivity in terms of employment. In terms of productivity boosting, we can argue about that for another day. So that's why the government took, in their view, the hard decision of doing two major policy shifts, removing subsidy from PMS, partially removing subsidy from energy, which is electricity. That's why we have band A and the remaining band. Also took out subsidy from FX, harmonizing. It was a managed float. I really don't know whether it's still a managed float till now. But now from that jump to almost 2,000 naira per dollar, we now have about 1,350. So there were some gains. The reserve has got into 49 billion. I could quote all of these numbers because we're familiar. We look at these numbers every other day. But the average Nigerian is saying, okay, when will it get to me? I remember, Kyle, when we were talking to one of the statisticians at the MBS, he said, look, he understands that the only way Nigerians will feel the impact of the policy shift will be when prices significantly, you know, reduce to a point where perhaps go back to where it was, or wage increase significantly to meet the current reality. Because one day I went to buy egg. My wife sent me to go get eggs. So I didn't know how much was egg. My head was still around 2015 naira. They told me 250. I was confused for a moment. I went to another, they said 300. I'm like, no, what's going on here? So I always like to use eggs as my test for depreciation in price or reduction in price of goods and services. In fact, there was this noodle we used to buy for 2,500 calories. I just priced it. They say it was 11,000. I was confused again. I was like, okay. So perhaps that's my own way of measuring, because I understand numbers, but
Which is
practically.
Go to the market more.
No, I go.
You should do more market runs.
So for the Nigerian wants to see how these prices come back to what they were able to afford. A lot of people can't still afford. So when they hear numbers like this, they're almost upset. But that's why we're bringing the economists to help us break it down. Mr. Emmanuel, apologies. Technology is not having a good time with us this morning, but we'll make the most of it. Go ahead, please.
No worries at all. No worries at all. So I was saying that towards the end of the last administration, you know, Ways and Means was securitized into a government bond. I think the coupon was anywhere between 9 and 10%, if I'm not mistaken. And you had a situation basically where, as inflation accelerated, the MPC at the CBN raised the MPR to match within what they call inflation to interest yield curve. You know, the government could not keep up with this FX wage bill in balance of payment, because as at 2022, the CBN was technically insolvent. You know, even if they don't like to acknowledge it, it owed $7 billion in FX forwards, it owed about $14 billion in FX swaps. It could not meet up with its FX obligations. It didn't even have 3 months of FX to meet with his balance of payment obligations, you know. And the credit line it had with his external asset managers, net asset ratio was in negative. So, you know, you had a situation where they came in, and then the difference between the official and black market, which was known as the black market premium, was trading at about 60%. And the government had to take the difficult decision to remove first petrol subsidy, which, you know, even if it was a good decision, and I supported it, and I still support the removal today, because it has liberalized the midstream and downstream sector, I still do not think that Nigerians are feeling the impact of subsidy removal, because the government cannot account for the crude oil barrels that was used under domestic crude intervention stock for crude swap for subsidy. You know, till today, they can't account for it, and I keep saying it, and I'll say to the government that they should account to Nigerians where those barrels that was used for petrol subsidy is actually going to today. You know, and then the government collapsed the FX rate to match the black market and the parallel and the official market rate. And the result was that you had stability in the FX market, and the market moved from a managed float to a system where today the market supplies its own FX, except for a few days ago when the CBN announced that it was going to allow FX supply to certain BDCs that had met pre-qualification, and, you know, to align the parallel and official market rate that was widening for the first time in over a year, you know. And then also electricity subsidy, even if that one is a little more complicated, you know, and MBET, which is the vehicle that the government, the special purpose vehicle government set up to match any fall in what they call final settlement statements, FSS, submitted by GENCOs to market operators, you know, to the market operator to pay the GENCOs, you know, it has created a distortion in the electricity market. So you have FX, then you have petrol. And the two major drivers, Joff, the two major drivers of inflation in Nigeria is energy and food. And because Nigeria's supply chain is so exposed, because in my view, from what I've seen, there isn't a lot of enterprise manufacturing in Nigeria. Enterprise manufacturing for the intermediates that are imported for the final consumer manufacturers to produce the commodities that we consume. Nigeria is still exposed to FX risk. You know, so even if the Naira is appreciating marginally, I still feel like you have an undervaluation premium of anywhere around 18 to 20% now. You know, you still have not seen that translation effect where the prices of goods are being revised. Even if the MBS is talking about CPI normalization, when you look at that calculation for cost of current year divided by cost of base year times 100, CPI normalization, you still are not seeing the real-time impact. You were talking about the price of egg. And then you look at what goes into the production of egg, the production of feed, maize, soybean, and all kinds of vitamins and amino acids. So you ask yourself, if maize prices and soybean prices have come down from what we used to have it in 2022, why has the price of feeds, poultry feeds to the poultry farmers not come down? And why has it not reflected in the price of chicken and most especially on the price of eggs? You know, so these are the real-time metrics that the statisticians at the Monetary Policy Technical Committee, which is like a secretariat for the Monetary Policy Committee at the Central Bank of Nigeria, they used to do regressive modeling to the numbers they can rely on if they are not going to adjust their APR to in my view.
There it goes again, the connection. But you know,
not aggressively cutting interest rate like they were aggressively increasing
Mr. Emmanuel,
interest rate in 2022.
Come in quickly because of time. You started by making or by giving a context as to how we got here, and something you said struck me. Maybe to drill deeper on that. That's the previous government with the ways and means and the way it handled the economy. And I recall recently when the Accountant General of the Federation, Mr. Shamsuddin Ogunjimi, was before the National Assembly defending the budget. I know the lawmakers were complaining. They said, there are contractors that haven't been paid over 2 trillion naira. MDAs haven't gotten monies that they were meant to get, some of them. And they were saying, come on, what is going on? And, the Accountant General found a wise way to say, well, I can only give what I get. I can't give what I don't have. And he then said, there is no more the ways and means that we used to have then, which he believes is good for the economy. So we're in a situation now where we're reforming to where we were just 10 years ago before the APC came to power. I have to say that because it's factual, it's what data says. But more importantly, these reforms, they sound good, but in actual fact, it's inconveniencing the economy in some sense. If contractors have not been paid, if some of the MDAs aren't getting some of the funds budgeted to them, and then we have some of these issues. So really, when you wait, are the reforms yielding as much fruits as they ought to?
The problem, with Nigeria is not that the principles of economics don't work. It's that politics always comes in the way and tries to distort the principles of economics. And I'll tell you why I said that. If you look at revenue government of if you remove not only supposed to save the barrels that was used to pay for subsidy, we should today is right? Where are those barrels? Number two, Section 38 of the CBN Act is very specific about a 5% cap. I said, if you look at the subsidy that was used for petrol, the crude oil barrels that was used for crude oil swap to pay for petrol subsidies, either through direct sale, direct purchase, or vendor financing program that it later operated before it was scrapped. When the government implemented Sections 205 of the PIA, and it said we're no longer going to provide under recovery, it meant that those barrels that was used for crude oil swap to pay petrol subsidies were now removed for that purpose. Now, the question we should ask the government is, where are those barrels and why is it not captured in fact? Number one. Number two, the Accountant General, you said the Accountant General talked about ways and means and they are no longer ways and I congratulate Cardozo on this. The fact that he's been very strict with the federal government on refusal to borrow the federal government money, which according to CBN Act says that you cannot borrow more than 5% equivalent of your real revenues for the previous accounting year. So if, for example, the real revenues of the federal government last year, for example, was 10 trillion naira, 5% of that is 500 billion. The law says that the CBN cannot borrow the federal government more than 500 billion for the previous accounting year, and that money has to be paid back within 12 months because the CBN has to close its book, because in accounting they have what they call expected credit losses of 12 months, which means that within 12 months, that interest has to be paid back, which is MPRO plus 3. And the CBN has to regularize its books because it can't carry that interest into a new accounting year. Okay, so you can see that, relying on ways and means as a temporary tool to meet up with deficits in the budget is not a strategy that the CBN supports by abusing that window. So unless the government ramps up revenue accretion by collecting taxes or by getting money from the oil and gas sector from dividends that is concessionaire NNPC pays to it, then there's a problem. Last year, NLNG did not pay any dividend to NNPC, I believe. The dividends, I didn't see any dividends paid. I don't know where that is coming from. If it's from judgment debts, then NLNG has
Oh dear. Looks like we're not getting the very best of connection this morning. But Mr. Emmanuel, here's what we'll do. We're going to have this conversation proper another time, so we'll get all of the full value, because it's not really nice to have the disruptions. It's a very important conversation around the economy, the figures, what is being done, what has been done, and what we must do better. But Mr. Kevin Emmanuel, we have to thank you for your time and have to do this very soon to ensure we get full value. Thank you, and apologies for all of the glitches. We'll take a quick break now. When we return, we'll talk about former Kaduna State Governor Nasir El-Rufai. Well, he's been taken to court now over that interview where he talked about wiretapping. What is happening in court? And what is this petition that has now been written against him, signed by prominent Nigerians? It's a big conversation. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. It's still your perfect morning start on Channels Television, the Morning Brief, and we're making progress to looking at another very critical matter that appears to be brewing between the National Security Advisor, Nuhu Ribadu, and former Kaduna State Governor Nasir El-Rufai. Of course, he has now been charged to court for an admission to what seems to be a crime in that interview that he granted on national television, where he admitted to wiretapping the conversation of the National Security Advisor. Of course, there are other levels to this subject, which is also allegations or concerns about stifling opposition. But what are the legal implications about this admission on live television? Joining us on this segment is constitutional lawyer and human rights activist, Mr. Inibehe Effiong. He joins us right here in our Lagos studio. Mr. Effiong, good morning.
Thank you. Good
and
morning.
Welcome to the program.
Good to be with you. Always a pleasure. Thank
yes,
you.
indeed. Now, I took time to listen to him yet again, and here's what he said in that interview. He said, because that I know, but the government does it all the time. They listen to our calls all the time without a court order. Someone tapped his phone and told us that he gave the order. That's the order for his arrest. That's the admission of the former Kaduna State Governor, that he tapped the phone conversation of the National Security Advisor. Now, talk to us about how this can stand as evidence in a court of law, and if this will go anywhere in the charge that the federal government has now laid before the former Kaduna State Governor.
Thank you. Let me start by saying, without equivocation, that wiretapping or tapping the phone conversation of any person ordinarily is a matter of grave concern. It is not only one that predicates on possible breach of the right to privacy as guaranteed under Section 37 of the Constitution, which states that the privacy of citizens, including their telephone conversations and telegraphic communications, is hereby guaranteed and protected. So the telephone conversation of every person is constitutionally protected, and there is no allowance for invasion of that privacy except in the manner permissible by law, namely where, for example, there is an order of court, or where it is done maybe in furtherance of national security, provided certain constitutional and legal safeguards are met. Now, I have watched, I have reviewed, I have evaluated the statements made by former governor of Kaduna State that has now become a subject of legal contestation. What is said, is it excusable? No. Should it be encouraged? Certainly not. But has he committed a crime? There's a constitutional right to presumption of innocence. I'm not going to pass judgment on the merit or otherwise of the charge that they. The National Security Advisor of Nigeria, at a time that terrorism is ravaging our country, that people are being killed in their hundreds, has now gone on record to say, yes, I was careless enough, I was reckless enough, I am so incompetent that the NSA, my own phone, has been wiretapped. Well, it appears that is what he's saying by the charge. Because they must take a position, definite position, whether his phone was wiretapped or not. If it was wiretapped, it speaks to his competence. If it was not wiretapped, what is the basis of the charge? They should resolve that first. I have started by saying that what El-Rufai said was unacceptable.
Sorry for cutting in. So who has to prove what? Let's take it in steps. That is the first charge, the second, or either the first count or the second count now. Who has to prove what? Is it the NSA or the DSS in this sense, or SSS, whatever name they call it, that will have to show that indeed Lassa El-Rufai, through his web proxy, actually did wiretap, or Lassa El-Rufai has to show that he actually did? You get my point?
El-Rufai doesn't have to show anything. I'm willing to take anybody on this with all sense of humility. I think every lawyer should agree to that point. He's not obligated to say anything. I'm not his fan, I'm not his admirer. I remember when he introduced the religious regulation bill in Kaduna State, and I wrote this article that went viral at the time. El-Rufai personally sends what I would describe as very unnecessary email to me. We were exchanging communication at the time. I was very antagonistic that why should I have an opinion about what he does in Kaduna State? So I don't see him as somebody who is tolerant of dissent. So I'm not speaking here holding brief for El-Rufai. I am saying that this government has shown seriousness in this matter. It doesn't have to say anything as far as this case is concerned. Because when you look at the charge, have they even told us the instruments that he used for the wiretap? Have they told us which of the phone of the NSA that was wiretapped? These are things they must disclose in the charge. Let me be heard on this point, which is part of the reason why I said FSF has no business prosecuting. They use the word cohorts, and your cohorts that is so unnecessary, to put it in a very mild language. Why will you use that kind of language in a charge in his cohorts? Cohorts. So they quickly went to file this. If the SSS was to undertake a serious investigation, you can look at it. When they concluded, they should have forwarded the file to the Ministry of Justice. The Ministry of Justice would have reviewed it and decided and took a decision whether to prosecute or not. I am saying that based on what they have disclosed to us, I'm not sure that this is something that should go to court. And if it had to go to court, it is the Attorney General of the Federation, or at best, maybe the police, that should have filed this charge. This is supposed to be an intelligence gathering agency. Because we are so used to lawlessness in this country, because we are so used to doing things the wrong way. So that is why in Nigeria today, the State Security Service is being deployed for things that are outside their mandate. They basically do all sort of things.
So, regardless of the technical inadequacies of the filing of the charge on the part of the government, the federal government, and even if El-Rufai pleads the fifth in this case by not self-incriminating himself, the government, on the other hand, also has admitted that indeed, by this charge, that the NSA's phone was wiretapped. Does it then mean that because of the technical inadequacies, the court will not find El-Rufai guilty, or because there has been an admission to a crime on national television, there is indeed a case before the court that can sail through?
Again, being cautionary, I cannot speak to his guilt. The court will make that determination. What I can tell you, and what I can tell you very strongly, is that the burden of proof rests entirely on the prosecution. It never shifts. Even if they want to argue evidential burden, I don't see how that will inure in their favor here. They will have to prove his guilt. El-Rufai, again, is not obligated to say anything. All he has to say in court is, I did not wiretap. And by the way, what are we talking about? That Malam Nuhu Ribadu, seriously, is willing to concede that his phone was wiretapped and is still in office at the NSA? Does that tell you something? In a country that kidnappers are calling their victims, in a country that Boko Haram terrorists are on TikTok, and the NSA of that country comes on record to say my phone was wiretapped. For me, that is a more serious security breach than the wiretap itself, than the charge itself. Because it speaks to a lot of things. And as I said, it was a reckless comment by the former governor of Kaduna State, for which some answers should be provided. But they are not interested in even getting answers. If they are interested in getting answers, shouldn't they have spoken to him? Because how did the wiretap happen? Have they told Nigerians? They are the ones to tell us. It's not El-Rufai that has the duty to make that disclosure. They have to disclose to us. And in the charge, they said others at large. Who are the others?
So for you, I think, I mean, if I get your drift now, for you, it is more disturbing that whether they filed it rightly or wrongly, or whatever it is you want to call it, the admission, as Bukola said, for the fact that they filed a case, they technically may have been admitting or may have admitted that the phone of an NSA has been wiretapped. And that is very borderline worrying on national security.
They have to admit it. If they don't admit it, the charge is a non-starter. They must first admit that his phone was wiretapped, and upon that admission, the National Security Advisor should tender his resignation, apologize to the president, apologize to Nigerians. I am sorry, my incompetence is now self-evidence. What other evidence of incompetence? If I tell you, National Security Advisor of a country, that my phone has been wiretapped, if they are not willing to concede, they cannot bring this charge. And by the way, they say, oh, he has confessed. Whether what he has said will amount to confession in court, I don't know. But what I know about confession, under section 27 and 28 of the Evidence Act 2011, it has to be direct, it has to be positive, it has to be unequivocal. If you listen to what El-Rufai said, can you tell me this morning that it was a direct, unequivocal, and positive admission of guilt? Because if it is direct, you don't admit to a crime through allegory, through allegorical terms or philosophical expressions. There should be no room for doubt or disputation. There has to be clarity
so there's
on how the wiretap happened.
There's no clarity in that comment.
Let me, before I yield to,
listened.
Count three. Let's read that count three.
Yes.
This, what do you call it now? This equipment matter that you, Malam Nasser El-Rufai, adult male, and others still at large, sometime in 2026 in Abuja, within the jurisdiction of this court, with others still at large, did use technical equipment or systems which compromised public safety, national security, and instilling reasonable apprehension of insecurity among Nigerians by unlawfully intercepting the phone conversation of the National Security Advisor, excuse me, Nuhu Ribadu, to which you admitted during an interview on the 13th of February 2026 on a Rise TV station, primetime program in Abuja, and thereby committed the offense contrary and punishable under this. What is
the technical equipment that was used?
I read the charge because I wanted you to see
the charge must have particulars.
Yes, I read the charge because I wanted you to see the premise of arrival.
I've seen it.
Premise of arrival.
I'm saying that the charge must disclose particulars.
I think largely you spoke to that earlier.
What is the name of the equipment? When was it acquired? Where is it kept? Who has access to that equipment this morning? These are questions that a serious investigative agency ought to answer. But what is their attitude to it? Somebody woke up in the morning, had a bad dream, rushed to court to file a charge, did not bother to speak to the person you want to prosecute. I am telling Nigerians, and I want to be quoted on this, that the federal government of Nigeria has no interest in prosecuting Lassa El-Rufai on this issue.
It's funny. I'm sure some will want you to maybe even represent him in court because you do a great job.
No, they're not interested in prosecuting him.
I mean him. That's Malam Lassa El-Rufai, because you're doing a great job helping to really see through this case. But I want us to speak to maybe a fundamentally important issue. And I think you mentioned it. There's also politics in this. In fact, some are already looking at 2031.
Yes.
Nuhu Ribadu, El-Rufai. I mean, after 2027 is done, there'll be a 2031, and there'll be someone to run for office
from the north,
from northern part of Nigeria. So while we are discussing this whole matter, there's some saying they've given us yet another distraction, something to distract us with and have a conversation about, when primarily this is about politics. So how are you factoring all of that in? Do you also see this from that angle? If that is what it is, how should Nigerians approach this?
Kayode, part of the problem with this case is that you have a president who, on subscribing to oath of office and oath of allegiance, on the 29th of May 2023, started campaigning for the next election the following day. This is a government of politics. This is almost, in my recent memory, you can correct me, that you have had a national security advisor as partisan as El-Rufai. I was watching... As Nuhu Ribadu. Sorry, as Nuhu Ribadu, sorry. I was watching the president's visit to Adamawa yesterday, live. It was streamed live by one of the television stations. I saw Nuhu Ribadu seated beside the president. Almost every gathering of the APC, the national security advisor of a country is there. No, that is an aberration. The NSA's office is ought to be substantially insulated from partisan politics, so that you have the NSA, national security. You don't bring politics into national security. You have the NSA of a country, openly partisan, wearing a Milocon cap, telling us 4+4, when Boko Haram is killing members of the armed forces, terrorists are rampaging the country. Now they have brought the US to help us. You know who is the National Security Advisor of the United States? The National Security Advisor of the US is Rubio, that is acting in that role. Do you see him follow Trump to every rally?
But he's partisan as well.
No, I'm not saying you shouldn't have political leaning. I'm saying that we had a man called Mongono, a former NSA. Ribadu is not the first. But I'm saying, in my recent history, recollection, the media should fact check me on this. I don't know of a national security advisor that has been more partisan than this current NSA. That is an aberration. No, the media should call it out. Why is that important? Because in determining whether this is a serious legal case, you have an NSA that is clothed with partisan outfits. And that blurs his judgment.
Is that even surprising in the sense? Bukola, sorry. Bukola, okay, go ahead. Bukola.
Go ahead.
Is that even surprising in the sense? This man, he ran for president. He ran for office of the president. This Nuhu Ribadu, under the party of the current president.
Action Congress.
I remember when incident happened, and he was boasting that time, and under this administration, saying nobody tries Tinubu and wins. And some of us raised concerns about, look, guy, can you just stick to your job at the end of the day? But so what the question I guess I'm asking, what is left to Nigerians? They've appointed him. Some people say he's doing a great job. So how should we assess him? Is it based on his partisan leaning or his performance in real time? Okay, they don't like that word, by the way, of managing national security.
When you have an Emilocon president you will likely have an Emilokong NSA. If you leave it, it's his turn. That is my assessment of him. All these guys are interested in his politics. His politics, because we are dealing with a serious issue here. Please, for 1 second, for the sake of this country, can we be serious? You mean the phone of the NSA was wiretapped? Do you know how serious that is? National Security Advisor, his own phone, people are able to intercept his conversation. There is no outrage. In the US, you have congressional hearings. I haven't heard a motion on the floor of the Senate, on the floor of the House of Reps. No legislative investigation that the phone of the NSA was wiretapped. And they are not even interested in asking the man who made that insinuation what exactly happened. They don't want to speak to him. So let Ribadu save Nigerians this embarrassment and tell us what is going on. You cannot allow this. It is unacceptable. And the president doesn't seem worried. I said yesterday, I'm not telling you hearsay, I watched it live yesterday. Check me as I'm talking. Tinubu on a state visit to Adamawa, Ribadu sat right beside him. Every gathering of the APC, the NSA is there. Is he advising APC on security? I don't understand. Is he the head of the APC Security Committee?
Well, it's from
and there's also there's also that aspect of El-Rufai talking about how he's using the ICPC to target him.
No, I don't agree with that.
Okay.
Let El-Rufai answer for the charges against him. EFCC has invited him.
But he's in government and he should know. So he says he's using the ICPC to deploy the DSS to make arrests, and that is a pattern in this administration.
Well, I don't know about that. I'm aware yesterday he reported at the FCC. He spent the night. I hope there was no mosquito. But on a serious note...
Did he spend the night or he returned home?
Well, I don't know.
Because he has subsequent appointments with the DSS.
There are reports that he spent the night. If he returned home, good. If he spent the night, good. As long as they don't detain him beyond conditional period. Let him answer for his stewardship in Kaduna. There's no sentiment to that. The people of Kaduna State deserve explanation on how we govern the state, on their finances.
Yeah.
Because I've told you I'm not a fan of this man. And the other comment he made was one of the activists, Daddy Yatta. Did you hear what he said? No. He was indirectly implicating Ganduje. Why is the government not interested in investigating the SSS? Why are they not investigating the disappearance of Daddy Yatta? Have you wondered? And now they are suddenly pretending. I read in the media that they now want to investigate it. So after all these years, because El-Rufai is no longer wearing a Milokon cap, they want to remember that a gentleman called Daddy Yatta forcefully was disappeared. I am saying that we stop playing politics with the lives of Nigerians. Now we will expect the government to give their family closure. What happened to Daddy Yatta? Because El-Rufai says it was a problem of the Kano state government. I haven't heard Ganduje, by the way, come out to challenge him. I don't know if his people have spoken, but even if they have, there has to be proper inquiry. El-Rufai should be invited.
All right.
To tell Nigerians who is the name, who is the police officer that confessed that he feels bad or he felt bad about his role in the disappearance of Daddy Yatta. El-Rufai as governor of Kaduna, again, I want to remind Nigerians, nobody should construe that, oh, this lawyer is coming to defend Malam. I don't have any interest in defending him. There are things about his governance that some of us fundamentally disagreed with, including the religious politics in the state. The people of Southern Kaduna have a lot to say. The people of Adara Kingdom...
We're getting into that conversation next.
Adara Kingdom, they have a lot to say about El-Rufai. But on this issue of wiretapping, Nigerians should not be carried away. This government is not interested in prosecuting El-Rufai.
So, were his comments without equivocation or not, I guess the courts will decide. But on the wider implications of his administration and what happened, that's where we're headed. But we must thank you very much, Mr. Enibe Effiong, for coming on the program and providing your professional insights. Mr. Enibe Effiong is a constitutional lawyer and human rights activist. Thank you for your time on the program.
Always a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
We'll take a moment now. When we return, we'll talk to a gentleman who has quite a lot to say about what transpired during the El-Rufai administration in Kaduna State. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
We have activist and journalist Stephen Kefas joining us next on the program, and he's one of the signatories to this document titled Kaduna Victims Coalition. Survivors and families demand full accountability for abuses under Nasir El-Rufai. No more impunity, no more silence. Now, this particular document was signed by Chidi Odinkalu, Audu Maikore, Gloria Balasin, Stephen Kefas, who joins us, and others, about, I think, 7 others who signed, in fact 9 others I should say, who signed this document. So Mr. Kefas, you listed some of the issues that you want there to be a public hearing, a public investigation on. Why now? Really, because some of these things happened some years ago. Is it that now is a great time because you see all of the pressure on him from the government, or what exactly influenced this timing?
Okay, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for this opportunity. Why now? I don't think we are just starting, because for some of us, we've been consistent on asking for accountability since May 29, 2023. We've been asking questions. We've been calling that there needs to be some form of hearing on El-Rufai's 8-year stewardship in Kaduna. So, yeah, I think this coalition that came up to put out this statement, it is because we now have a platform. We said, hey, we cannot continue to do this as individuals. Why not we come together as survivors, not victims, survivors of El-Rufai's 8-year brutality, to say, hey, let's ask these questions. There are so many questions unanswered, and I hope and pray that as the conversation continues now, Nigerians will begin to ask this question: what happened to the paramount ruler of the Adara chieftain, who was abducted and murdered under very controversial circumstances? And some of the things that happened in the chiefdom after his murder speaks volume as to government's involvement. This is not just an allegation. There are evidence to point to the fact that something or someone may have wanted the chief dead, so that policies can change and his chiefdom can be balkanized, like we eventually saw in Kaduna.
There are other cases mentioned. Abubakar Idris, whom we all know as Daddy Yatta, who was abducted 2019. In fact, the former governor spoke to that on that interview. So 2019 up until now, almost 7 years now. Also, you mentioned other people in that particular statement. And I want to know, by the way, you mentioned on behalf of ourselves and in solemn memory of those killed or disappeared who cannot speak. Do you have a figure to this? Yes, there are 2 names at least in this statement, but do you have a figure really? Because you said something quite important. You said for those who survived his tenure. Some will say, well, they're just mere allegations. If you're in government, you have enemies, political enemies who don't want you to, attain greater heights. So what kind of evidence and figures, if you can't put numbers to it, do you have?
Okay. My mentor, Ibanga Isime, who is also a journalist. In fact, we are in exile. He was in Ghana. I was in the Gambia. Now, Ibanga had done an investigative story, a 3-part investigative report on the Southern Kaduna killing. And after he published his report, 9 of the people he interviewed died mysteriously. Some of them were community leaders. Some of them were local activists. Some of them were local vigilante members. They died mysteriously. 9 of them. Ibanga is still alive. So Ibanga had to flee the country for exile. That is how bad it was. And we've moved on. But these people died. Dadiata is missing. The Adara chief, died. He was murdered. And let me also say this. While in prison myself, I was also a victim of abduction. And I've said it before, I said, the model they used to disappear that theater was the same model they wanted to use for me. But I was lucky enough to make one phone call from police custody. A policewoman actually made that call on my behalf using her mobile phone. I think she's retired now. If not for that phone call, nobody would have known what happened to me, because when they abducted me, because there was a warrant, they took possession of my phone and instructed the police station in Okoro, Port Harcourt, that nobody should see me, nobody should talk to me. So they wanted to do just make sure I'm not seen again, nobody heard about me. But thank God for that phone call. And of course, mine was in May 2019. The theater was in August 2019, or 4 or 5 months later. So while in prison, I met the suspect that El-Rufai's government claimed to have arrested for the abduction and murder of the Adara chief. They were arrested in November 2018. From November 2018 to May 2023, when El-Rufai left office, those guys were not prosecuted. And in fact, when I got to prison, they were looking better than me, who was coming from outside the prison. That's to tell you that I don't know who was taking care of them, but they were doing very well in prison. There's no remorse. They were not looking like people who are standing trial for such a great offense. To date, they've not been prosecuted. But Zidane, a community vigilante member who was protecting and defending his people in Kaduna, was tried and sentenced to death by hanging. So what are we talking about? So I think some of these issues need to be reopened. Some of these cases need to be revisited. Where are the suspects arrested for the murder of the Adara chief? What has happened to them? Why is the trial not going on as it ought to be? And there are many others. Like we said, we have evidence. If Banga is still alive, we have the names of the 9 people he interviewed from his report, who are all dead at this point.
Well, this question about timing is really important too. So in order to put it in proper context, because people would wonder, why is this group coming up now that it appears as if the former governor is embattled and is having, cases with the federal government. But talk to us about what you believe, or your group believes to be, the understanding of the former governor's position as far as that Yatta is concerned, because that question seems to be haunting him from the time he left office up until now. And in the recent interview that he granted, that has now become a subject of contention, he's saying that, look, that Yatta was not even a critic of the Kaduna state government at the time. He had issues rather with the Kano state government. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's not true. In October 2020, I went on an investigation into Dadiata's disappearance. I went to Federal University Dusema, where I interviewed the Arsenal chairman of the institution. I went to Kano, where Dadiata had traveled to, and some of this information I'm going to say now have not been in public domain. When I went to Katsina, Federal University Dusema, that was where I was told that Dadiata left that school where he lectured as a lecturer in the linguistic department and traveled to Kano that same day on 2nd of August 2019. When he got to Kano, he told his friend, his very close friend, his childhood friend, that he was coming to Kano, but his friend didn't get to see him. I also interviewed the friend. Sometimes around 9 p.m., he told the friend that he was going to Kaduna. So he left Kano to Kaduna on the same day. And all through the journey, he was on a phone call. But we cannot tell who he was on phone with. He got to Kaduna sometimes around 2 a.m. because of, at that time, the road construction, Zaria Kano road construction. So I'm sure that may have affected his journey. So he got to Kaduna around 2 a.m. According to his wife, who I interviewed, I also interviewed the mother who died some years ago. His wife said she heard when he got to the compound, he was driving a BMW vehicle. At that moment, through the window, she could see some armed persons who accosted the husband. They took him away alongside his vehicle. Now, but she told me something. She told me that when the husband was taken away, few days later, because that was Ramadan, I think it was, close to Salah, I think, one of the Salah celebrations. She said that she, El-Rufai, brought a ram to the family. I think I've said this on X, and I'm saying it again. The wife is still alive. Some of his family members are still alive. You can verify. He brought a ram to her that is for Salah. And she was wondering, you never liked my husband. You guys were not friends. Why are you bringing a ram to my family? And the family unanimously agreed that the ram should be returned to El-Rufai's son, who sent the ram. Now, the family, because we were on Twitter when Dadiata was doing his advocacy, we saw his criticisms on El-Rufai. The reason why El-Rufai said they should point to any tweets when Dadiata criticizes government was because the Twitter handle is gone. So there's no evidence. You can't revisit there. It's gone. And during my investigation, I also, one of the brick walls it hit was that we couldn't obtain the call data record, which would have given us an idea who he was on phone with on that day. Some people called him to come to Kaduna. That is what it means for him to have traveled that late. And a year later, in 2021, Globalcom reissued the line, which is also bad. You have a missing person case that is yet to be closed, and you reissued the line the person was using. And that was how I couldn't continue with that investigation. And then I started getting threats. I had to go on exile and all that. So we believe that the El-Rufai's family, even when you look at Bashir's tweet on 23rd December 2019, you could tell that that family also has question to answer with regards to Dadiata's disappearance.
So let me come in with two questions in one because of time. First, I listened to what he said. He said, as you've rightly said, he said, go to his page. He was criticizing more of the Kano state government under Ganduje. That wasn't him. That these were his words. He did not know Dadiata until after his abduction. He did not know the young man. So I would like you to respond to that. I say he didn't know him at all. So this issue that you just raised now, that's the first thing I want you to respond to. The second part is, what happened with your case so that people have a clear picture of what we're dealing with?
Okay. It is not true that El-Rufai didn't know who Dadiata was. At least his sons knew Dadiata. One of his sons took a ram to the wife. The wife is still alive. His family are still alive. They can attest to this because I had this interview with them in Kaduna. Now, so it is not possible for El-Rufai as the governor of Kaduna State to claim he didn't know Dadiata, a fierce critic of his government then. So that is not true. And of course, like I said earlier, the page no longer exists. So nobody can go there and get some of these things. And maybe if Nigerians have known that a day like this, screenshots of some of Dadiata's criticisms of El-Rufai would have been taken. So my own case, of course, I was abducted. They had no case against me. They kept me in prison for 6 months, 162 days to be precise. And then we went to court. They kept telling the judge that while I've been in detention, I've been writing articles criticizing El-Rufai's government. And I was wondering, is criticism even a crime? Eventually, they came to court one day and the judge said, do you have evidence with these articles he has been writing in detention? They said no, and she granted me bail. And that was the end of the case. These cases are cooked up not to prosecute, but to persecute. And that is why the moment you make bail, the case died a natural death.
Right. So we wait to see how this will be handled because, I mean, you're quite clear that you will provide testimonies, evidence, and any material assistance to support inquiries and ensure those responsible for crimes face due process in that statement, which you hashtag justice to El-Rufai, justice for Kaduna victims. Where is Dadiata accountability now? But here's my question to you. This is the same man that was nominated for ministerial appointment until it didn't work out. This is the same man you've seen him with now president, even dancing, having a great time. This is the same man that gave an interview right here on Channels Television that a lot of people said was a master stroke that helped the president's ambition, or at least the president to become now president, right? So this is someone who's been very close to the party in power. Do you trust the government to take this up, knowing fully well that, hey, behind the scenes, they may still be chummy?
Well, that is left to be seen if the government is going to take up some of these issues. But I believe that there is no time that is good enough for people to be held accountable. Accountability is very important in leadership. And of course, yesterday I saw protesters in Kaduna protesting to the State House of Assembly, asking questions as to how he managed the state resources. So I believe that, I don't want to believe that he's been persecuted because like Aldo Mekuni said yesterday, he who must go to equity must go there with a clean hand. So does El-Rufai have clean hands? How has he fared as a governor for 8 years? So these are the issues. So as to whether the government is going to do the needful to ensure prosecution and not persecution, I don't believe he should be persecuted, even though he persecuted some of us. I believe that there are more than enough evidence to try him and to prosecute him according to the laws of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So I don't think the government needs to persecute him. Yeah, he did that to some of us, but we forgive him, we let go. But all we are saying is let there be proper accountability for his 8-year tenure as governor of Kaduna State.
We'll see how things turn out in this justice to, I mean, we've heard justice for, but this one is now justice to El-Rufai. Stephen Kefas, journalist, activist, we have to thank you for sharing your personal experience and some of the work you've done in this build-up. Thank you and wish you the very best.
Thank you.
All right, just before we go, we'd like to show you some of this shared video, or videos that have been making the rounds. There's a lot of things happening, but we have to highlight some things that will bring you joy. And this one is the Lagos State Governor, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, offering his seat to the one-day governor and overall winner of the 21st Lagos Spelling Bee competition. Her name, yes, women win again, Miss Etiemonu Esther. I know a lot of people may have wished that at that moment she sat down, she just says, you know what, minimum wage is now 250,000. And it just stands. Of course, she can't make such pronouncements.
But more importantly, we hope that, you know, a woman does hold that office someday very soon. And maybe it would just be, what's her name again?
Esther.
Etiemonu. Yeah, Etiemonu. Maybe it will just be Esther one day soon.
Is that actually what just got by son?
Yeah. And I think it's been a trend, right? Most of the one-day governors usually wear that same cap that has the infinity symbol, which is now, of course, the Ashiwaju cap.
Interesting.
But there's more that we've got to show you. We have time for just one more, right, Coyote?
Absolutely. And just to mention that she's a student of, we need to celebrate the students
at the school
of Lagos State Senior Model College, Igbokuta, in Lagos House Marina. But yeah, the next one.
Well done to her. Well done.
And the next one is from the Senate, I believe. Do we have that video where Senator Natasha Akpoti-Odoaga was reportedly involved in another clash as her aide allegedly assaulted Senator Titus Zack's secretary at his office. The altercation, according to reports, arose from a lack of notice given to the senator on the budget hearing for the North Central Development Commission. But Senator Zack later clarified that not all North Central senators belong to that commission, according to reports. Now, this is yet another clash in a series of events, you know, between the senator and her colleagues. And this throws up questions around whether the Senate has indeed moved on from events of last year.
She should just calm down. I don't know what's going on, but you know, right now, it could turn to be, they will now be seen as a troublemaker or whatever. But we don't know the full story. whether this is just a bad blood situation. But Senator Zam said she doesn't belong to that committee, so there was no way she should have been invited. But when you have series of these face-off, it becomes quite concerning. So even if you're right, you may be looking like you're the one that is wrong because of history. So she needs to maybe deploy a bit more tact in managing these men and their ego and situations like this, so that she's not looked at in a certain way at the end of the day.
And
that's my own 2 cents for her.
Yeah, and let me add a few cents to it. And it's an admonition, a general admonition. What does the 10th Senate want to be remembered for? Do you want to be remembered for great bills, acts of legislation, interventions to better the lives of Nigerians? Or you want to be remembered for controversies, a lot of them needless, honestly.
Very needless.
So I think it's a conversation to be had, and I must tell you, it's tough because I mean these are senators, so-called distinguished senators, representing their people. So there's usually ego in the room. There's a mandate of the people which they say they have. So hey, you can't tell me that. But hey, it's the 10th Senate. Nobody would see you separate, and that's how they will rate you. What did you achieve during the 4 years? Did you better the lives of Nigerians, or it was just controversy upon controversy? That is the question.
I just pray for wisdom for her to be able to manage these things, because I don't know, maybe sometimes some persons may just deliberately trigger her, knowing there may be a response. So she has to be very careful so that this doesn't disturb her work, and it will not be like this is all about. But thank you so much for coming on the program, for staying with us on the program. Remember, Sunrise Daily is up for the top of the hour, 9 a.m. I'm Jeffrey Uzonga. Bye-bye.
Well, the week is so young, we hope it promises to be a good one. So join us again tomorrow. I am Bukola Koka.
And I'm Kyle Ofikio. Thank you.